Well, both some hits and misses for me this time, but one comic that really hit well, and it's not even about a superhero. Hi, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week, usually, I'm catching up this week, 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan and explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything I talk about. This is your first and only warning. Okay, we're taking a look right now at comics originally released to the Ultra tier on March 12th, 2024, originally published February 13th, 2024. First from that group is Batman number 144. This issue ends the Joker Year 1 story on sort of a whimper, I think. It connected eventually the future flashes we've been seeing in the previous installments of this story, but it didn't justify to me the time spent on them to get around to that connecting point. And I feel like at the end of the day, nothing really definitive about the Joker was revealed, except that he's still arguably a complete mystery. I think they lean into some things that at a surface glance you could say, oh, this is new, but then they introduce a little bit of ambiguity, like, oh, is this really what we think it is? And so at the end of the day, I don't know. I guess there's still from previous issues those times where we went inside the Joker's mind, and I've already said that I wasn't really a big fan of those moments, so I'm personally trying to ignore them. And everything else I feel like I have license to ignore if I want to, so ultimately does it really matter? What impact does it really have on Joker and his relationship with Batman? Not much, and actually I'm okay with that. You know, I think the Joker ain't broke, and so, well, he did get broken a little bit with the whole three Jokers thing, and so this is a step toward at least minimizing what I perceive to be the damage done by the three Jokers concept. Anyway, so moving on, after that I read Batman, Superman, World's Finest, number 24, and this closes our return to the Kingdom Come storyline and Gog's origin story, but also creates an interesting post-Kingdom Come bookend. This story arc up to this point has been taking place before the events of Kingdom Come, but then they give us a peek flashing forward to stuff that happens after Kingdom Come story is finished. In the final scene, where we flash forward to after the events of Kingdom Come, we see that Gog is broken, as he was really at the end of the Kingdom Come story, and just filled with regret over what he's done, what he has become, and he's kneeling at a gravestone. It's not clear to me whose gravesite he's at, but he says, all my fault, with tears kneeling at this headstone. I am a weapon, nothing but, please forgive me. So again, I don't know who he's talking to, but then Superman comes up behind him and says, hello, David, and he says, you can't change what you've done. The mistakes of the past can't be erased, but they can be tempered by the actions of the future. You've acknowledged your mistakes. Now burn your regrets. Use their fire to light a better path. Pick yourself up and just do better. After all that's happened, I still believe you can. So what we have here is a pretty middle ground approach to the concept of quote-unquote redemption that is explored very often in comics, saying you can't change what you've done, the mistakes of the past can't be erased, and that's true. Even as Christians, it's not that our sins of the past are literally removed from the timeline and they never happened. Instead, what happens is that because of the righteousness of Jesus and the sacrifice he made in our place, we are no longer subject to punishment and wrath because of those sins, because Jesus took that punishment and wrath for us. And so his innocence is credited to us instead, just as our guilt was credited to him in that exchange. So in that sense, the Christian can say that in terms of, God's impending and just wrath, our mistakes of the past are erased, but that's really metaphorically speaking. They didn't literally no longer happen. They still happened. But anyway, Superman goes on to say, but they can, meaning the mistakes of the past, they can be tempered by the actions of the future. I'm not exactly sure what he means by they can be shaped by the actions of the future. What does he mean by that? So Superman himself is getting into some pretty strong metaphorical language that an interpretation is not provided for. They can be tempered. Well, does that mean that they can be tempered? They can be refined, they can be sharpened, they can be seen in a new light, they can become something different by the actions of the future? Maybe, I don't know, we could talk about that, but I don't know if it's really worth it because I'm not even sure if that's the correct interpretation of the author's intent. He goes on to say, you've acknowledged your mistakes, now burn your regrets. Burn your regrets, use their fire to light a better path. What is meant by that? What is the internal self-reflection that he's talking about here? Burn your regrets, use the fire to light a better path. I think really it's just poetic language that's hard to nail down into actually substantive reflection, mental reflection and resolution and reasoning out of kind of like the moral difficulty of the situation that David is in. But I think that his final statement is pretty good. Pick yourself up and just do better. I think apart from Christ and with Christ, that is still something that can and should be affirmed. That we can't ourselves repair the damage of the past. And that's what I often see in these kinds of stories, this sentiment that someone can make up for what they've done by choosing to live a better life going forward. And that is just broken. That doesn't work, at least not in terms of cosmic justice, because we already owe it to our Creator to live a perfectly moral and just life every day. So we can't make up for the sins of the past by being really great today, because we were already supposed to be really great today. So I appreciate that it's not getting into that territory. It is instead saying, listen, there's a mess, and there's nothing that can be done to make that mess non-existent and not happen, or to really make up for it. The responsibility now is to make a change going forward. So I think that it's still very incomplete. The sense of justice, the sense of true justice, true forgiveness is not present here. Because apart from Christ, there is really no way to have that true justice. But what is left here is still at least something that I think I can affirm, apart from the questionable metaphorical stuff that means who knows what. Anyway, the Darkseid stuff was nice because I'm a fan of Darkseid, and he was appropriately kind of quote-unquote defeated by really making him lose interest. And I think that's a good way to deal with an unstoppable threat that Darkseid is kind of narratively supposed to be, or at least to feel like. But all that said, I'm still very much ready for a new arc. I've never been, as I've said before, a big fan of Kingdom Come. I thought it was cool and interesting for its time, but it gets so much attention and so much, it's held in such high regard in a way that I don't really understand. So I'm ready to move on. Speaking of moving on, Nightwing 111 is another one that I read this week. This is, I think, the start of a new arc that in this issue focuses on a boy being rescued by Batman and Nightwing after this boy loses his parents to violent crime, which of course is going to be very personal to both Batman and Nightwing. So there's emotional ties for them to this situation, and in just some of the interactions they were having with this boy, and them having experienced what they did, wanting to use their experiential knowledge to try and help this boy make things as good for him as they possibly can be in this horrible situation. So it's this great kind of device that allows us not only to see them exercise some compassion on this boy, but also allows me to mourn again for their loss. So it had some nice emotional feels that I really appreciated. I'm not sure if the story itself is going to keep me hooked. That remains to be seen, but I did appreciate the character and emotional beats that this issue started the arc out with. Wonder Woman 6, another one I've read, and I have been mostly enjoying this run by Tom King and this story that kind of puts Wonder Woman at odds with the U.S. government, and we discover that there's this kind of embodiment of evil pseudo-American imperialism that's been manipulating the government for decades. We're not sure about the nature of him. Is he some kind of a spiritual being, like a metaphysical or a godlike being like Diana's ilk? Or what is going on? But they started using this device, I don't know how many issues back, but I just really noticed it strongly in this issue, where that villain is providing the narration, speaking to Wonder Woman's future daughter about Wonder Woman. And this is the first issue in this arc that I've really been bored by. And I think a lot of it had to do with the villain acting as the narrator and kind of an instructor to Diana's future daughter about Diana. And it has a lecture type vibe to it, and it's talking about the events of the story and what's going on with Diana at this kind of academic, theoretical kind of distance. Some of that is the style of the dialogue as well, the narration as well. But those things combined, the style and the nature of it being this person who is detached and removed from any concern or care about Diana, is kind of cold and stuff. It removes me from the action of the story and from emotional investment in the story. And that's really what I want in fiction. If fiction is not giving me that, then I tend to not be interested in, say, the more concept-driven or plot-driven stuff. I'm really interested in the character-driven stuff. And this run has had some cool character-oriented stuff, redefining Diana as a bit of a fish out of water in modern American culture. And I've really enjoyed those aspects that have leaned into character. But these other kinds of moments, and especially the whole run of this issue, is like, this is definitely a step in the direction I don't like. So hopefully we will get out of this narration device and we'll get back into closer to Diana's thoughts, what Diana is feeling, so that I can more easily emotionally invest in the stakes and the action that's going on in Wonder Woman. So anyway, that's Wonder Woman number 6. So now we're getting into comics, since I'm playing catch-up again, that were released on the Ultra Tier on March 26th, 2024, and in print February 27th, 2024. First of those I'll mention is J. Garrick the Flash, number 5. This issue featured Dr. Midnight, the Pieter Cross, the kind of like modern day reimagining or legacy type hero of Dr. Midnight that was introduced in Jeff Johns' run of JSA, and I really do like this Dr. Midnight, so it was fun for me to see him brought back in to a DC story. This issue, I've been really enjoying the premise of this run so far, with Jay and his wife discovering a long-lost daughter that, because of weird time sci-fi stuff, they forgot about, and she was taken out of the timeline, but now she's dropped back into it. All their memories are rushing back, all that kind of stuff. And so now they have this young adult daughter that they are reacclimating their lives to. And so a lot of that, I'm really interested in kind of like the long-term ongoing storytelling that could come from that. I don't know if this is going to be an ongoing series or if it's just going to be done after, a 6-issue arc. But I think I'm ready for this story that is basically reinserting Judy into the comic book continuity. I'm ready for that to be done and for us to just settle into the long-term status quo of Jay and his daughter and just family life and family superheroing and stuff. I think that Jeremy Adams, who's writing this, did a great job with that dynamic in the pages of The Flash. And so now to see it happening here, I think is also playing to his strengths. But I'm ready for us to get done with the introductory villain that they have to deal with and into a little bit more long-term kind of familial storytelling. So not a must-read experience, this issue at least, but still great meat and potatoes comic book stuff. I checked in again with Green Arrow number 9 after being kind of away for a while because it wasn't really being what I wanted it to be as a Green Arrow book, but I think now maybe it's setting itself up to be the kind of Green Arrow book that I would like. It takes place in the fallout of the big Beast World crossover event, and because of what happened there, Amanda Waller, who basically runs the Suicide Squad and just does all kinds of terrible Black Ops stuff, or leads those missions, or not those missions. She she gives the orders for all kinds of terrible Black Ops missions done by the U.S. government, and one of those, of course, is the Suicide Squad and all that they're up to. So she's a very morally gray, leaning toward morally black kind of character. But anyway, because of how things went so wrong, evidently she gets some kind of authority to take over I don't know, superheroing and metahumans. At the very least, she takes possession of the Justice League's headquarters, the Hall of Justice, and sets up base there, basically. And Ollie wants to find Merlin. He breaks into the Hall of Justice. I'm trying to remember exactly what motivated him to go in there. But anyway, he has this meetup with Amanda Waller, of course. She knows that he's looking for Merlin, not the wizard, but the longtime enemy of Green Arrow, who was very much involved and responsible for the separation of his family that Ollie has been dealing with in the issues leading up to this. So he wants to find Merlin. Waller will give him Merlin's location because she's actually implanted a brain bomb into him with a tracker on it. She knows exactly where he is. She will give Ollie that information if he agrees to work for her. And that sounds great. I mean, obviously it sounds bad for Ollie, but I think getting Green Arrow into these kind of boots on the ground, almost military, black ops, street level type stuff, instead of the cosmic stuff that he was caught up in for a while up to this point. I think the street level, military style, black ops, espionage, whatever, that kind of stuff is much more, is a much better fit for Green Arrow. And I think putting him into morally questionable territory is also going to be very interesting to him. Green Arrow has long been a character with very strong convictions. He's, as I've known him, been written, I think for the time that I wasn't reading like Justice League, he was very much leaned into as a left-leaning liberal character. And before that as well, with like hard-traveling heroes, with the whole stuff with Green Lantern and stuff. So he very much has represented in the past the liberal left. I don't know if he stands out that much anymore. I think maybe because so many of comics these days are written from a pretty left-leaning perspective, and so who is Green Arrow now? But anyway, he has these strong convictions and a very particular way of seeing the world, seeing justice, seeing how things should be, and Waller is not part of that picture. That's a little bit interesting to me because left-leaning folks, classically speaking, that position is going to be a little bit more like government hands-on and big government type stuff, which Waller fits into. But then again, maybe that Waller is usually written as kind of like this extreme representation of conservatism or right-leaning stuff. I don't know. Anyway, I just know there's going to be conflict here. And so whatever the politics of it are, I'm not really interested in. It's more going to be interesting about the tension that Ollie feels at probably being asked to compromise on his convictions. And so that kind of that situation, I think, is just great for generating some character-driven stuff that I'll find potentially really enjoyable. So we will see, but definitely Green Arrow has my curiosity piqued at this point. But that's not the book that I really enjoyed most this week. That goes to Penguin number 7. And what we see that's kind of been alluded to, hinted at up to this point, but is fully revealed in this issue, is the revelation that since the early years of Batman, fighting crime in Gotham, and Penguin coming on the scene, initially just as Oswald Cobblepot and not the Penguin, from that point to present day, that's what was the revelation, seemingly to me, in this issue. There has been a relationship between these two characters. Penguin, early on, began informing Batman on criminals based on information that Cobblepot was learning, because again, he wasn't Penguin at that time, I guess, but that he was learning from running the Iceberg Lounge, and where a bunch of criminals will come and, recreate and do business sometimes, and so Cobblepot was picking up all kinds of juicy tidbits and was feeding those to Batman. And then Batman would use that information to take them down. And Batman Penguin realizes that, people are going to start figuring out that he's not really one of them if this keeps up for too long. And so he realized he needed to create a reputation as a criminal, a really bad one. And so he creates this persona of the Penguin to fit in with the Arkham crazies that Batman usually fights. Why? Because he knows that he can, if he's not insane and does these horrible crimes that Batman kind of catches him for, punishes him for, has him taken in for, giving him the street cred as a criminal, right? Well, the kind of stuff that he would need to do to get that kind of street cred would get him in prison for decades. So instead, he puts on this persona of like this obsession with penguins and all this kind of stuff so that he can reasonably be sent to Arkham. And then he's going to be in Arkham for maybe a couple months. He'll be treated. They'll say he's better. And then they'll let him out. And he can get right back to it. And so he really has, Arkham's called a revolving door a number of times by fans. And I think even in some scripts of comics now and then. But, but like, Penguin has actually mastered the creation of Arkham as a revolving door, at least for himself. So what's interesting to me is that Batman finds this to be a reasonable compromise, that he's willing to play along with this. Most of this story is written from Penguin's perspective. We get a little bit from Batman's, but not a lot. And I just have to think that there's a lot more going on in Batman's mind about this whole relationship, which we learn in this issue has actually been apparently continuing up to this day. So the whole history of Batman's relationship and interactions with Penguins now is kind of being retconned to be seen in a different light. And I know some fans don't like it when that kind of stuff is done, going back to the pages of Identity Crisis, but many times, if it's something that appeals to me, I don't have a problem with the concept itself of kind of retconning in this way. And this certainly appeals to me. Why? Because again, it introduces conflict, internal moral conflict potentially for Bruce Wayne, for us as readers as we're parsing through, what do I think about the morality of this situation? And so, I really enjoy that. And like, the icing on the cake of the moral complexity is we find at the end that the Iceberg Lounge was purchased apparently by Bruce Wayne and maybe is still owned by him to this day. So I'm really interested to see where that goes. Some other neat things about the Penguin were done in this issue, well, prior to this issue, but that I was really noticing on full display here. The art style makes him look really kind of gross. I mean, he's morbidly obese for his stature, and it's hard to tell, like, what with the little bumps and rolls and folds of the fat in his face, how it almost looks like pockmarks and scar tissue. I mean, it's really kind of a grotesque view. I've never seen even a morbidly obese person that looks as sort of disfigured and exaggerated in this way as the drawing here does. And so it gives him kind of a creepy vibe. But at the same time, they also do other things like have him brutally kill some characters when they don't see it coming at all. And that's what we've seen through this run of about focusing on the Penguin. Well, the book is the Penguin, sorry. That other people they tend to see him as harmless, as pathetic, as not threatening, but actually because of the way he plans, and then sometimes because of the sudden, unexpected actions that he takes, he is very threatening. He is very dangerous, and I think I like that. It's really the idea of someone who is overlooked and underestimated actually being super capable. It's really the dark side of the classic Superman nerd fantasy. The classic Superman nerd fantasy that Siegel and Schuster had, or maybe it was just Siegel in particular, was what if people overlooked me? I'm meek, I'm mild, I've got, glasses or whatever, and nobody pays any attention to me, but secretly they didn't know I was actually this amazing person that could do these amazing things. So that's the nerd fantasy that was created with Superman, and this is the dark side of that. Like, people look at me and they think I'm worthless, that I can't do anything right, that I'm just nothing, I'm not worthy of consideration, but actually I am extremely capable and extremely dangerous, and they better watch out. So it's very interesting. I think it's something that if we're finding it gratifying emotionally or psychologically in some way, maybe that's a red flag to recognize, okay, is there some anger or some bitterness that I'm not dealing with that is making this attractive to me in that way? So that's something that, I have to question myself as I kind of find this really compelling. But I think there's other aspects of it that are certainly compelling for other reasons, just the unexpected nature of it, and just that broad concept of someone being overlooked that actually is much more capable. I think it's a great device, and I love that it's being applied to Penguin, because I have always overlooked Penguin. I have always thought he's silly and ridiculous, and I can't take him seriously, and I just love how this run of the Penguin is making me take him seriously and actually be riveted by this character for the first time ever. Finally, I read Alan Scott, Green Lantern, number 5. This issue continues kind of his conflict with the Crimson Flame. Is that the guy's name? Basically, the Sinestro for him, but with a red ring. And this issue further links Alan Scott's ring to willpower, which I think classically it's not been linked that way. It's just been magic. But they're kind of like doing a subtle retcon. There's always been a connection. Well, I guess not always, but like there was eventually a retcon that kind of connected his ring to the Guardians of the Universe, which created the Green Lantern Corps, in that the Guardians gathered up the wild magic of the universe, put it into a single essence called the Starheart, and from that, Alan Scott's ring was kind of born out of the sentience that developed within the Starheart itself. But anyway, they do kind of link the power of his ring a little bit more to will. The concept of the Crimson Flame, the Red Lantern or the Crimson Flame character uses a Red Lantern that's generated from the Crimson Flame's powers. It feels a little bit tacked on. I was hoping, I don't know if I actually wasn't hoping for anything, but once the reveal came in this issue of what the Crimson Flame was, where it came from, it felt a little bit like a growth, a tumor that came off of the Starheart, rather than its own really viable thing on its own and its powerful, unique concept on its own. It feels a little bit tacked on to the Starheart, so I wouldn't mind some further revelations about it in the future that make it a little bit more of an independent concept from the Starheart. But anyway, there's an interesting moment here where I'm wondering if Alan's persistence, his will, his very will itself, is causing some self-deception about Vlad. I mean, one thing about our will, if it's not guided correctly, it just becomes stubbornness. It becomes digging our heels into the wrong things for the wrong reasons. And there seems to be a moment in this issue where that happens with Alan. As you may remember, if you've read this series or if you've been hearing me talk about it, Crimson Flame and Green Lantern, Alan Scott, and as he knew the Crimson Flame before, Johnny Ladd, his actual name is Vlad something or other. He was a Russian secret agent. But they were lovers for a time, really because Johnny, or Vlad, was manipulating Alan to better position himself to get his hands on this Crimson Flame that he knew the U.S. government, was maybe going to give him access to. I think that's what the story was, or his motivations. Anyway, it was nefarious motivations. He was not truly interested in Alan. Or was he? I think we're supposed to maybe side with Alan's reasoning here. As they're fighting, Alan says, we're different, you and I. You know I could never do the horrific things you've done, and neither could the man I fell in love with. Not without some kind of powerful outside influence. This isn't you, Johnny. And so he is determined, it seems, to believe that Johnny is not actually this horrible person, but has been manipulated, warped in some way by something or someone else. Now, is Alan a flawed hero in the writer's mind at this moment? And this is not actually the case, that Johnny actually is just a corrupt individual who went down a bad path years ago and, is what he appears to be at this point. Is that what's going on? Or are we meant to interpret Alan as the voice of the writer right now, the voice of truth, the perspective from which truth comes in this comic that we are meant to accept as the reality of the situation? I'm not sure which is the case, and really, most time, creative intent doesn't really matter to me. I think a lot of times it's pretty irrelevant compared to just how it actually lands, how it actually strikes us as the consumers, as the audience. And what I see a lot of room for in the writing here, maybe arguably more room for than the alternative, is that Alan is deceived here. He says, "This isn't you, Johnny," and then the next panel, Vlad says, "Johnny was a lie," and Alan says, "Not to me." And that's a very subjective statement. To me, Johnny was not a lie. Well, of course, Johnny wasn't a lie to you. You were being fooled. But that doesn't mean that because you believed something to be true, that it actually was true. Years ago, there started to be this use of the word truth that had a possessive attached to it. Your truth, my truth, her truth, speak your truth. And that's one of many symptoms of how the concept of truth has been eroded in our usage of the word. But truth is that which corresponds to fact or reality. Truth is objective. And I carry that conviction into reading this comic with me. And so when Vlad says Johnny was a lie and Alan says not to me, I see Alan very stubbornly deceiving himself, allowing his deception to continue, but this time he is perpetrating it against himself. Why? I think because he doesn't want to accept the truth of this situation and maybe the pain that would cause him. Anyway, there's a lot more that could be said. There's ways that this could potentially be tied to the LGBTQ theming that's been going on in this comic up to this point, but rather than do that, I'll just wrap up my thoughts. I am wearing the white ring this week. I haven't worn the white ring before. I think I'm going to reserve the white ring for weeks where I more than just enjoyed comics. I'm more than just hopeful about the direction that they're going in, but they just make me freaking feel alive as a comic book fan anyway. And the Penguin #7 did that for me. It took all of what has come before in the run up to this point, and it brought it to this great revelation that just, I mean, I don't know what's going to come next. It might be all downhill from here. I think this issue, like, this is the kind of stuff that I read comics for, that I love comics for, that reward my investment in a single continuity, in this case, the DC universe. So yeah, I'm just really happy with the Penguin. And despite the hits and misses of the rest of the books, this struck me so intensely in my appreciation of what they were doing, my enjoyment of it, that it leaves me with the overriding feeling of freaking being alive as a comic book fan this week. So anyway, which of these books has your attention and why? Or is there some book that came out in the last couple of weeks on the Ultra tier that I haven't mentioned that you've got some thoughts about? I'd love, as always, to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Remember to check out christiangeekcentral.com for tons more content. Thanks for watching. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.